an Empire Boxing and Unlearning Network production.
Welcome back to the Empire Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Jana. With us today, we have coaching legend, a Canadian coaching legend to be specific. Yeah, I mean, that's how I've heard you described. So I'm waiting for you to prove me wrong here, Jessy. We are joined by Jessy Thompson all the way from Montreal. So appreciate you adapting to the time zone and making time to come and chat with us today, Jessy. How you feeling?
I'm good. Ready for bed. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, hopefully we'll bring you up and then you'll get nice and tired and you have a fantastic rest of your evening and you can relax. So tell us about your day. I'm guessing you had a crazy busy day in the gyms and everything today. So walk us through what today looked like for you as an example.
Today's just like any other day. Wake up around 5 a.m, get my 3 kids to wake me and my wife up. And then it's straight to the gym. You know, I've been at the gym all day, working with some pros, working with some clients, and that's it. 9 p.m. I'm back home now in time for this podcast.
Nice. So most people on the 9 to 5, you on the 5 to 9 life.
Yeah, it's all over the place to be honest. Never.
And so you got 3 kids?
Yeah, three
How
three
old
daughters.
Are they?
I have twins that are 3 years old, and the younger one, she's 2 years old. So
wow,
the house is loud and crazy. I love it.
My God, so 3 daughters. So what I'm curious to know what a boxing coach has planned for their 3 daughters.
Oh, they know defense already. They know how to throw.
Perfect.
The technique is not there yet, but they know how to throw punches. They know how to put their hands up. And for sure, I'm going to teach them how to box. I think it's just, awesome. You're in boxing yourself, like I'm not talking about the competition side of things, but more just to build confidence, build that self-esteem and actually know how to defend yourself. That's very important.
For sure. Well, you said the oldest 2 are twins. They're 3 years old.
Yeah.
So you have 10 years till they start getting asked out on dates and,
okay.
need to defend themselves. So you got some time, Dad.
Daddy will be there watching. That's for sure.
Oh, I bet. Honestly, I pity the fool. I pity the fool. Talk to us about boxing and your journey, how you got into it, and who were your influences.
Yeah, there's been. I'm 31 years old. I've been in the sport since I'm 6 or 7 years old. So there's been quite a few people who've influenced me over the time. But I started at 7 years old. My father brought me to the boxing gym, and I had an amateur career till I was about 16. But at a very young age, I could just tell I had something for coaching, and I think it was when I was 18 years old I really started taking coaching full time, and the rest is history. I've been doing it, making a living out of it, and living the dream.
Wow.
As much as boxing can have its downsides, and sometimes there's lows and stuff. We just keep pushing and getting better, and try to learn through the career.
Mm-hmm. And so, you said you found an affinity for coaching quite young. Can you point to where that came from? What about it drew you in? And was there a specific person that inspired you to take it that way?
There was one special person, and if there's boxing associate to someone's face in Canada, that's Russ Amber. So I was very fortunate enough for my father to bring me to Russ Amber's gym. So from a young age, I was watching greatness. I was seeing how it works, whether it's the technical part of boxing, whether it's the strategy part of boxing, whether it's the business side of it. So right away, I think 15 years ago, Russ had his own show on TSN, and it was every Sunday night or Monday night. So, just to show at what level he was at, working with world champions, starting his own boxing equipment company, which is Rival Boxing, that started in 2005, I think. So just being around him, just to know how to talk to media, or just to be presentable and how to speak with fighters, it's just the best influence I could have had, honestly. I was really grateful, and I'm lucky,
All that training brought you to this fateful moment on the Empire Boxing Podcast. Who knew?
Yeah, that's right.
Good thing you have all that media training. We're pretty serious over here. Well, that's amazing. What was the relationship or the influence that your father had on you apart from bringing you to the gym? Did he coach you? Was he involved in
actually, my dad. Sorry, I didn't let you finish.
That's okay. Tell us about Dad.
My dad was basically Russ Amber's assistant coach. So my dad, for the reputation of the name, just him being in the business of boxing for over 10 years, that helped me too when I started coaching. So people would associate me to my father. So that was a huge plus, and then just having him around and growing up in the gym with him around, it was phenomenal. And I'm very grateful for him to push me, to have had pushed me into boxing, and now I make a career out of it, and it was amazing times, and now I'm doing things, I wouldn't say on my own, but now it's my time, so it's nice to see the evolution going on.
Yeah, and that really set you on your path. Now, have you lived or trained anywhere outside of Montreal?
Yeah, for fights, I've been around the world, but I've also coached in Florida recently. I think it was back in April. I was there for 5 weeks. So it really gave me a new perspective on coaching and fighters. And, I love getting out of my comfort. I love seeing different experiences, seeing how boxing is worked around the world, just like when you go to fights, that fight week, you see how coaches work, how the commission works, how the promoters work. So I'm so open for experiences, and just to keep seeing things from a different outlook, different perspective. I also trained in Thailand for a month, boxing with the national team. So even that helped me see different views of boxing. Even Russ Amber had Pedro Diaz down in Montreal for like maybe a year or two. So just the way he held pads like really influenced the way I hold pads and the way they base their trainings. It's just seeing different experiences that I think when you're a coach, you really have to have an open view, and you start seeing different tricks. When you're young, you start coaching, you're like, oh no, my way is the best way. I figured all this game out, and then you start seeing different views, different ways of coaching, different strategies in the ring. So I think whether it was with Pedro Diaz, Russ Amber, or traveling, even down in Florida, like at the beginning of this year, it just keeps adding up, and then you get to pick and choose what you want to adjust in your coaching styles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the coolest thing about the more new school coaches, which, I would consider. I was recently talking to my friend on the podcast, Julian Chua, down in LA, and himself, right?
Huge.
Like himself and you, like there's a totally different, open, adaptable, highly educated, and also, heavily influenced as well. Like allowing yourself to be influenced from the past, but be open-minded to observe the present to create the future of boxing is the coolest thing I think about you guys, you new school kind of coaches, like really bring to the game. And you're 31, like you have, a good career ahead of you to really influence boxing in a really big way.
Yeah, I'm still very young, and shout out to Julian. I know he's doing great things down at Brick House Gym.
Yeah,
and,
he's killing it.
He's really killing it, and like once you get to that level where you're actually killing it, it's just a matter of keep working hard, staying humble, and all the success is going to come his way. But,
absolutely. I can't wait to go and see what he's doing down there.
Yeah, it's big things. Trust me. But I think what new coaches kind of understand, or there's this new wave you see in all sports, is more like the way I coach my fighters is not the way Russ used to coach it, and it's not the way the older heads train in this city. I like to adapt my trainings. So whether like every individual, every guy going inside that ring or girl, they have different. They were brought up in a different environment. They respond well to some certain things, but they don't respond well to other things. So just that aspect of like trying to figure out who you're working with, getting close to them, seeing how they feel, understanding their emotions, just helps you push them in different gears. Whereas before it was one way, and you work with that way, that's good for you. If it works for you, good. If it don't, bye, next boxer. But now there's definitely a change. And as coaches, I think it's super important to adapt. You want to keep your moral beliefs and your way of coaching, but you definitely need to work around. And communication is so key too, just to try and understand what you're working with and what fighters, so they can talk to you and give you feedback. Like I'll ask my fighters, how was I in the ring? How was I in that fight? And they give you feedback. And you just play with that.
Yeah, Julie and I were actually talking on the kind of the topic of cornering and like what's helpful coaching and what's, not really helpful coaching. Like the idea of sort of cheerleading too much or presenting too much information to the athlete when their heart rate's like 180 beats a minute, and they're not hearing half of what you say. So we had an interesting kind of conversation about the idea of being simple and precise and concise, like stripping it down so that you have 30 seconds or less of information to present to your athletes so they can actually effectively execute. What's your cornering strategy when you're cornering?
It depends. Are we early in the fight? Are we up in the fight? Are we down in the fight? Are we on the road on the fight? Or are we home? There's so many different different aspects to the game that will depend. Like sometimes I'll have to calm a guy down. Like he's too excited. He's letting off too much power. So to answer your question, it's really a case by case. But like I said before, when you're a coach, you got to read that. You got to understand your fighter. You understand what beast is in the ring right now and how to gauge it. Sometimes I'll have to slap my guy in the face, like, wake up, what are you doing? Are you awake? Like, listen, sometimes it'll be like the first 30 seconds, take a deep breath. Listen, you're doing everything good. Now let's add this. Sometimes it won't even be adding stuff, maybe be a bit like, you need to fix this because right now we're getting clipped because you're leaving your punches hang, or it depends. It's really like, but you gotta be calm as a coach. You gotta understand when to pick it up. You gotta understand when to slow it down. And you know what? Like as a coach yourself, like you could see things, but when you have like let's say 2 or 3 other good coaches who know the fighter and that are with you, you ask them, during the round, what do you think? What do you think? You get their feedback and sometimes it's even good to have maybe a voice that's not even part of the team, right? So like, let's say last weekend I had Mohammed fight and Russ was in the corner with us. We know Russ, but he hasn't seen Mo in the gym. He hasn't watched him spar, see where he's at, where's his development, what's he working on in the gym. But just to get that outside perspective, sometimes us coaches, we're with the fighter so much that we don't really see it, and then you get this opinion from someone else who's watching the fight as a whole, from the outside. They might see something else. It's the same thing. Sometimes I'll send sparrings to other coaches and just try to get their feedback for my fighters, and vice versa.
I love that. I think that collaborative energy is also very new school. It's not so much time. Me and my fighter, and it's there's that removal of sort of that ego, a little bit more humility, a little bit more of a collaborative approach to athletes. I think is really just going to benefit the athletes. I'm curious to know so I hear the idea of adaptability that you're talking about a lot when it comes to coaching and how important being able to adapt is. Are there, 3 key characteristics that you feel a good coach must have?
Well, adaptive, like you just said. I mean, are we talking boxing or just in general?
Yeah, let's talk boxing. Like if adaptability is, one of those key characteristics, what would maybe two more in your opinion be?
Very good question. Just understanding maybe it like adapting, but understanding individuals. So like I said before, like knowing how to push them in certain ways, when to hold them back, just like the
personability,
understanding people, understanding what's going on, Then as a boxing coach, I mean, like it's very important that the techniques, like the basic techniques, and then the strategy, we're fighting this guy. What kind of fighter are we bringing to the table? Boom, it doesn't go well after 2-3 rounds. We got to switch styles. You have to be able to, being a boxing coach, like there's no perfect science, it's not, you're dealing with an individual fighting another individual. You have both guys trying to take their heads off, and then you have everything around that, it might be the boxer's promoter, the boxer's manager, matchmaking, whatever, So you got to be able to put on these different hats as a coach, so adapting is one, understanding people, and I think you need to keep evolving, but there's something that's really lost in boxing, and like this is not to take away anything from anyone, but the techniques of boxing is something that you just see slowly going down in boxing. If you watch fights,
are you referring specifically to like the technical aspects of fighting, or the technical knowledge of coaches?
The knowledge of teaching the art of boxing. So
Gotcha.
Understanding how many jabs you can throw, How do you pivot the hips? How do you snap your shoulder? How do you turn your wrist? How do you hit with both knuckles? How do you engage your core, the legs, the opening and closing the legs, like how close, how far do you want them, rolling with punches properly, catching punches properly, understanding head movement. These are all, like, the quality of that is not really seen. That's my opinion. I might be completely wrong, but it's something that's important, and you see guys fight on TV or even at the Olympics. You see a lot of talent. You see a lot of athletes. You see a lot of people understanding what they're good at. So maybe they're strong, so they're a powerful boxer. Maybe they're long and lanky, so they're outside boxers. Like, the strategy part, I don't think, like, it's people understand that. They see, like, even casual fans, people who are watching boxing a lot will be like, well, he has to throw more, or he has to keep it outside, or he has to move his head. He's hitting and he's keeping his head there. So the strategy part is, some people have it, some people don't, but the artistic part, so the technical part, just the posture, where's your chin going? What are you looking at? Those are all little details that I don't see much of.
Do you think that has anything to do with how Instagram is sort of evolved into everyone's business card being a boxing trainer? I think I saw an interview that you did. Someone was asking you a question recently.
Yeah.
Just your opinion on the fitness boxing world and whether it's doing any justice or favors to,
It's
provide the obvious difference between technical coaches who understand not only, like, they don't just understand boxing, but they actually know how to teach. And
now
that's different, right?
Now you
so
got it.
Yeah, do you think that Instagram kind of plays a bit of a role in that?
I don't know if it's that. I don't know. I wouldn't want to say it's because of social media. Now there's no more technically sound coaches. I think it's just something that slips through the cracks, and maybe it's something that's not emphasized enough. Maybe it's not something that really, like, coaches pay attention to, But on the other side of it, like the social media boxing, it's something that really was bothering me, like maybe like 2-3 years ago. I was like, well, look at her or look at him. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers and doing all these combos, and that's not boxing, And I was like negative about it, a bit like the YouTube boxing. But you know what? Like, at the end of the day, it's good for boxing. It's good. Like, no matter how you see it, it's good for boxing, So I'm not judging anymore, and I kind of embrace it and push it too,
Yeah.
But definitely there's, like, when you say fitness boxing or like social media boxing, it doesn't really represent boxing itself, unless you've been in the ring, like, I don't know, like sparring or fights, or you will see that most of what is taught on social media, it wouldn't work in a boxing fight. Unless you're like maybe Lomachenko or, one of the greatest fighters of our time right now, So you see Canelo doing his head movement and you think, well, I'll do that. Well, yeah, but you need, like, there's maybe 150 other steps you need to take before you do that
there's
kind of head movement.
context to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Even the Mayweather pads, I mean, guys, it's for the camera. Floyd is a counter boxer. He'll make you miss. He'll make you bite. He'll be, like, very conservative. He's not throwing 15-20 punches within one combo. But people who are maybe not fully in the game won't see that. They won't understand that. But
I think
from that, I think
social media can be a platform for all types of coaches, and I think it's really about how they're branding themselves or how they're representing themselves, and if there's clarity around, what lane are they in, and because at the end of the day, the resume really shows what it is that you're doing in the industry and what you're not. But I do agree with you. I think it can be as beneficial as it can be confusing for the consumer, or harmful, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's confusion, but it's an interesting and beautiful tool that, also can connect us with a whole bunch of knowledge. To your point, you see something on social media that one of the greats is doing and you're like, oh, I'm going to apply that. But do you have, like, can you tie your shoelaces before you start running, kind of thing? Like,
that's a good one. I'm going to steal that
begin,
one.
right?
I like that one.
I had a track coach back in the day. He was like, okay, his whole thing was about mentally pulling us back to, like, but tie your laces. Or it was a basketball coach. he's like, all the skill in the world goes down the drain if you didn't tie your shoelaces. You're going to trip on yourself,
100%.
So it's a good discipline. I love it. Now, how do you balance your family life and this crazy coaching life that you have?
That's one of the hardest struggles there is, I
Right?
hope by the time I'm 50, I figure it out, but it's just a matter of trying to balance everything. I mean, life is, as everyone knows, life can be easy, it could be hard, but usually it's hard, So you just gotta try to adapt and, communicate is important, just to have people on the same page and understand what's going on. And there will be sacrifices, there will be times where it's harder, but you have to see the big picture. It's just a matter of adapting, to be honest, and trying to
Yeah.
balance it off. Like last weekend we were away on a small trip, for 3 days. So you play with it, you see how it goes. You communicate a bit like boxing,
In your opinion, what do you think separates the successes of, Quebec as a province with their, that they specifically stand out in boxing comparatively to other provinces? What do you think some of the key factors are there in their success, your success?
Boxing in Montreal has a rich history. It was very popular in the 80s and 90s. So I think just having that as a background, just propulsed having good coaches. Montreal, like I said, I was down in Florida, and trust me, there's a lot of fighters there. There's so many like high level pro fighters, But what we have in Montreal, what I see is there's a lot of good coaches, and when you have good coaches, that attracts fighters from the outside. So there's that part, right? So to teach the boxing, the proper technique and stuff, I feel like there's a lot of good coaches in Montreal. And right now there's a bit of a like a chemistry. A lot of coaches are working together, So that just helps too, right? And then on the other side, you have very good promoters, whether it's Camille Stefan or Yvon Michel. Yvon Michel been there for years, So just to have those shows constant, the consistency, even with Ida Tiger, what they're doing it's unbelievable, for Montreal. So just to have those two promoters put on 10, 15, 20 shows, it's huge. It keeps the wheel turning, And there's other promoters that are in the works of also doing their own shows. So I think when you have that consistency of having shows and those promoters being associated with, whether it's Top Rank, Probellum, or even Golden Boy, or when you're able to associate and have your fighter fight on your show and then ship them up to the US on TV, I mean, that's huge, So I think those two elements are what makes Montreal probably like the number one city in Montreal, and probably like a top 5, top 10 in the world, in North America, right? So
what did you notice? I remember you were saying you're observing when you were in Florida, your experience there. Was there anything specific that you took away? You're like, I'm going to apply this when I get home. And was there anything that you saw that was like, you were just going, what the hell's going on here? Were there a positive and a negative there?
yeah, I mean, in Florida, for like I've been to Boston too for like 4 or 5 camps, but in Florida there's so many fighters. So the level of sparring is just, it's hard to compete with them. I mean, in Montreal, I have a 130 pounder and then a 135 pounder, and I've had guys in and out in camp. There's usually like at the top level, there's usually like 3 or 4 maximum sparring partners. And you spar these guys over and over and over that, like today we were at sparring at Donnybrooks, and like I'm there talking to the coach, how's your kids? What do like there's this kind the fighters are talking, hey, how's it going? What are those boots? You go down to Florida, it's hi. Like they're somewhat respectful, because I've been to Vegas too. Like in Florida, they're pretty respectful, especially the coaches. But you're going in there, it's like a fight. So here we're sparring the same people over and over and over, and God bless them, like there's just so much you could do, and then you're in the US and you're sparring 2 times, 3 times a week, and every sparring is like almost like a fight. I'm not saying it's the best thing, but that level of competition, that level of speed, and that level of like the exchanges, it just like it brings you another level. So if you're doing a 3-4 week camp in Florida and you're sparring like ex-Olympians or pros that are 15, 20 and 0, and they're different. You don't even know their names, and they're just studs, So you're sparring like it's a fight. So when you come to your fight after a 6 or 8 week camp, your speed is at another level. Not that they understand boxing more, not that their coaches are better, not that their strength conditionings are better, not that, like, they're humans. It's just the competition of it, And that's another thing, a problem that we have in Canada is, you're an amateur fighter, you're not fighting enough. Like, you're not fighting enough. In the US, there are 60 million people. You're fighting every weekend, and it's not just one fight per weekend, Same thing with Europe. So the guys end up turning pro with 200, 300 amateur fights, whereas here they turn pro, Sometimes you'll get guys who get on the international team and they travel a little bit, but they usually have 60, 80 fights, and they fought the same guy over and over again. So so that's the main thing with Florida and Montreal that I saw right away. I'm like, we have to come back down here and do at least 2-3 weeks of sparring, just because the level is different.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty easy for the fighters to, let their foot off. I mean, I've experienced it too, sparring the same people. You kind of let your foot off the gas.
There's something about it.
In a way. Yeah, you're chatting shit, or someone says, oh, like, hey, like, this hurts a little, or I'm feeling a little tired today. And all of a sudden it's just like that just enters your brain, and you're like, okay, like, gas off 5% or whatever, or exactly what to expect, and you're not really able to execute any new element to your game real time, because it's so predictable, and the intensity level is so predictable, and that is a really tough thing. And I think a lot of Canadian athletes probably go through that, especially in women's amateur boxing. There's like no one in your weight class or whatever, and then you have to travel, and the fights just aren't there, and it is tough. So in your opinion, what would it take for Canada to sort of get to maybe the level of Florida or Los Angeles? Like, how long would that take, and what would be the key elements of that?
I don't see it happening, to be honest. The main thing with Florida and like these hotbeds like LA, or even Vegas, Vegas, Florida, and LA, why they attract so many fighters. One of the main reasons is because of the weather. So already Canada, like, we're down there. Then it's there's a lot of Hispanic fighters, like Spanish-speaking fighters from whether it's Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Colombia, Mexico, that they're going to travel to the U.S. and just stay there. So it's hard to, and it's like this whole snowball effect. So you get all these fighters coming, all these coaches, all this money being dumped, So for Montreal to have that, we would just have to have so much, like, there has to be that snowball effect, and it hasn't really gone there in Canada. There's just, the money's not there. There's not enough people, but it's still a great way to start up your career. I'm not saying I'm not bashing Canada for boxing. I mean, we could be in another country where there's zero boxing, but to get to a point where you're in Florida, I don't see it. I can't see it. Vegas too, like fighters from the US will travel to like Florida. They'll travel to Texas. They'll travel to LA. They'll travel to Vegas.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much easier to travel internationally in the States too. Like, Canada makes it so hard and so expensive for us to travel internationally, or nationally, where is in the States, you can do it for under $200 sometimes, hop state to state. It's so for upcoming fighters that are really on a budget trying to get experience, it's far more doable than it is in Canada. And even for us to be crossing the border all the time, these athletes, like, how do you afford to do that? Curious, speaking on the topic of, the States, and wondering what your opinion is on, the sort of new look that Triller and Bare Knuckle and the Triad and Jake Paul's influence in boxing. Like, what's your opinion on all of that?
I mean, it's entertainment at the end of the day,
Do you believe it's good for boxing?
Like the YouTube boxing, I think it's good, because I had my negative thoughts about it too before, but I actually participated in an event down in Tampa Bay, actually in Florida, and there were 12,000 people there. I mean, it was crazy. The atmosphere was nuts. I've been to some of the biggest stage, whether it's Lomachenko or Canelo, who are big stars. I was in the UK, in Russia, Germany, the US but that atmosphere that was there down in Tampa Bay for those YouTube fights was crazy. So yeah, I think it's good for boxing. I do one-on-one trainings, I do private trainings because that's it helps the finances of boxing itself. And
Right.
I see clients who are strictly there because they saw Jake Paul fight, so they're pumping money into boxing, so
Mm.
I have nothing
I-
bad to say about it. I mean, as
right.
long as you understand, like, there's YouTube boxing and then there's those fighters who've been doing it their whole lives.
Right. Well, there's also these like hybrid rule sets where you have like MMA fighters fighting boxing athletes under this like,
Entertainment.
Yeah, new rules. Like it's really interesting, and it's you get a lot of salty people that are like, "This is ridiculous. Like, what are we wasting our, precious hours on?" And then you do see an audience of 12,000 that have all paid tickets to see combat sport, and maybe for the first time in their life appreciated it or saw a nuance, and then to your point, then they stumble into your gym and go, yeah, I'm like, Jake Paul inspired me. Like, I don't know what I would do if someone said Jake Paul inspired me. Like, I don't know if I think I'd slap them first and then be like, okay, I'll take your money, train with me, like, or whatever. Like, it's just an interesting era that we're entering. And I love hearing, like old school coaches' perspectives on it. And also like the new school guys, they're adaptable and open-minded, and kind of your opinion on that as well. So very interesting. Now, yeah, I guess so. I mean, like, you're not moving with the times if you're closed off to how things are changing, and that, I mean, that's a great point. I have a couple. So Dan Norman, he gave me some other question ideas for it, which I'm gonna dive into one of Dan's questions here, and he was curious about do you think that the pros today are as good as sort of like the golden era, the 70s and 80s?
I hate comparing. I know I did it before. I compared, the coaching, but I mean, this is the problem that you never hear this. Okay, what I'm about to say, but we look back at the golden, like us, or even like the older heads. We look back, but we look back only sometimes at just the big fights. But we could do the same thing in 10 years. We could do the same thing about now and just handpick, like, oh, that fight, what a fight that was, like,
right.
Wow, so, like, are the fighters better, or we're looking at the 80s, the Hagler, the Hearns and stuff like that. And we're like, oh yeah, that was a great fight. But in 10 years, we could do the same thing about, we're doing it now with Gaddy and Ward, like, so to say
You're comparing highlight reels.
Yeah. So,
it's
I
all
mean,
highlights.
I'm sure there was boring fights back then. Were the fighters a bit more brutal and had that warrior instinct? Once again, maybe we're just handpicking, you know what I mean? So
right.
It's hard to say if the fighters are better now and they're worse now. But definitely I think that the science behind conditioning, so pushing the athletes, finding the ways of nutrition, like, I don't even take care of conditioning for my fighters. There's someone who's specialized and educated, who went to university and probably got masters and doctorates and all that, Back then the coach would do everything. So there's certain points that evolved, and maybe there's some that, maybe they'll say that life is easier now than it was in the 80s. I mean, I don't like to judge because I didn't live in that moment,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I'm sure in 20 years, in 20, 30 years, you're going to watch fights that happened this year in 2022, and you'd be like, oh, those guys used to fight, So.
Yeah, such a good point. And on the strength and conditioning topic, I was also speaking recently with my friend Taylor Ramsell, who came on the podcast. So you might be familiar with him. He's Dimitri Bivall's S&C coach. And we were just talking about the idea of, now we're starting to see strength and conditioning coaches have their place, not just in the corners, but in the gyms with like high level boxers. And, let's say 20, 30 years ago, it was just like 100 sit-ups and push-ups till you can't do a push-up anymore. And it's so amazing to see, I think, to your point, like maybe the conditioning of the athletes is just more scientific. Maybe take the word better out of it, that there's more science to the camps and the phases of the strength and conditioning programs, and like how these athletes can peak at a high level repetitively with progressive overload in their training, rest stages. And I think having a more evolved scientific approach to the S&C is really impacting athletes in a big way. And we're seeing that at a high level. We saw, Bivall, even just for example, just out-condition Canelo so badly, and one's not more skilled or, than the other. Like they're very different fighters. And obviously they both have a wealth of experience, and, Canelo's Canelo, but the conditioning that Bival had, and maybe I'm biased. I'd like to think it was because my buddy was this coach. I'm like, yeah, boy. But shout out to Taylor. But it was brilliant to see where the difference in the conditioning. And I mean, there was also a weight class, change that Canelo had to make as well. And that can play its role. But interesting to see how that's coming in, and even in UFC and seeing some of these athletes get to just like superhuman levels of performance again and again and again. It's pretty amazing. You can always tell when a camp went bad too, right? Like, oh.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then another question that Dan had that I'm really curious about was talk to us about your connection with the Grant brothers and how that evolved.
The Grant brothers, I've known them since when I started boxing, because Russ was basically coaching Otis and Howard, and even Ryan, their younger brother who lives in Toronto and has his own gym, So there was a time in my career when I started coaching. I think I was 18, 19, and after a couple years, I kind of like took a step back from boxing, just wanted to see, where I'm going with it. And then my little brother was training at the Grand. So he called me over and asked me to train him there. And one thing led to another, So I stayed in their gym for 7 years. And I was their amateur head coach there. And I was their cut man for all their pros. So they really if we were to break it down, Russ really taught me, he'd teach me how to be a coach, how to have the eye to be a good coach. And then, there was these other influences, whether it was Pedro Diaz, Mark Ramsey, Mike Moffa, and they impacted me too along the way. And Boisvert, who's a coach from Montreal. But the grants really allow me to work that, get the experience, turn a few of my amateurs into the pros, So, and they were also doing their pro shows themselves. So I kind of saw how the business works, and traveled with them too. So I worked with the Grants for 7 years. To me, they're family, they're some of the best guys that there is in this world, and boxing, their name is gold, So I got to get my own experience working with them and seeing how it works. And now since COVID, I think 2 years ago, I started doing things more on my own and opened the gym, So it's kind of like that's the evolution. And, I'm grateful for the time with the Grants, and we still talk, and I still bring my guys there to spar. And, we still work and talk together. It's like family.
Awesome. Very cool history, and kind of an awesome legacy. Curious who is on your current roster. For those who might not maybe know you or familiar with, your current, actually, let's do both, like your notable athlete history, and then who's on your current roster. Fill us in on that.
Yeah. So the two main fighters I'm working with, and I've been working with them since early in their career. One of them is Mohamed Souma Oro. He was supposed to fight on the Empire show, I think it was last April, not this April, the April before. He's now 12-1. I started him from day one. So the first day he was in his gym, in a boxing gym, he was with me. And so it's been interesting. It's been a bumpy ride, ups and downs, whether it was in the amateurs or the pros. But now we're starting to get some momentum building, and we're ready for the next step. And then I have young Avery. He's 21 years old. He's 7-0. 7-0. He fights at 128, 126, 130. He's still growing, so we're not really sure what way he's going to end up. But I started coaching him when he was probably 15 years old. And those are my two main guys. I work with Ryan Ford too, who's out in Edmonton, who's had a stellar stellar MMA career, and he's been doing the boxing.
The real deal.
The real deal, the one and only.
The real deal.
So him too, I owe him a lot. He went into the grants, and he gave me the opportunity to become his head coach, and we had a lot of great experiences traveling the world, and just that experience working with Ryan and traveling and being in these big fights, big venues, seeing how other commissions work, other promoters work. It's like I can't even repay the experience that he's brought to me. And I feel like, I brought him a lot of boxing knowledge too, and I helped him get better in his boxing game. So I've had the Mo and Avery, and then Ryan, and then I'll work with other pro fighters here and there. So I'm currently like for sure I'm always looking for talent. I'm
Mhm.
I'm interested in having more fighters. Not too much because I really put a lot of personal care in all my fighters. I talk to them every day. I know what they are. I really get close to them. So now that I have a few years in the pro game, I'm able to like maybe handpick or be like, yeah, I could work with you, or no, it's just not gonna work out. So.
Mhm.
And then in the past, I've worked as cutman, the big guys in Montreal, whether it's been Jean Pascal, Lucien Boutte, David Lemieux. I was able to work somehow with them, whether it's in their corners or working the pads with them.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Some pretty unforgettable experiences. Within that wealth of experience, was there one standout fight or experience or camp that sort of sits in your mind as the most meaningful one?
If we're talking about fights, right off like the top of my head, there's been quite a few, whether it was when I was a cut man or whether it was when I was a coach and something I said change or impact the fight. Those are the memories I'll have, or the big knockout wins, or
Mm.
the fights where you're really unsure if you're like it's a 50-50 fight and you pull it out, those are always amazing. But I also remember the experiences that didn't go well, and
Mm.
those are interesting because to me those are the experiences where it didn't go so well. Those are the experiences I always refer back. Those are the experiences I always like I won't do that again, or I have to change that, or I have to fix that. Whereas the winning, when you win a big fight or you have a successful experience, you're just high on the adrenaline, you're high on the experience, you're so happy that you're maybe not focusing on the little details, or you're not like
Mm.
as motivated, so it's a balance of it. It is what it is, the experiences.
Yeah. Where do you think women's professional boxing is going to be going in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? And how much of an impact did the Taylor Serrano fight have on that, do you think?
I think now that people are turning in, they're putting the TV on, it's definitely going to be good. It's just going to go up from here because people are finally giving the chance for women to fight and to be on a prime spot. Yes, maybe women won't have those knockout reels, or they won't get those knockout ratios that the men will have. But there's
Mm-hmm.
still extreme excitement, extreme you know great show. So I think it's just going to go up from here, and especially now that people have an eye for it, it's just going to go up. That's the
Yeah.
entertainment business. It's what's going on now. What's selling tickets or selling views.
Yeah. I think it's unique because women's boxing um, kind of, it's probably going to be one of the only professional women's sport that really gets a ton of love. Like, I think it's going to outweigh the WNBA. It's going to outweigh, like name another
You know
professional
what?
women's
You
sport that
bring an
gets any kind
excellent
of
point.
love, right?
You
So I
bring
think
an excellent point.
boxing might be the one that people are as keen to
Maybe
watch.
tennis though.
What's
Tennis,
that?
tennis is very
Yeah,
high up there.
totally. Great points. Tennis and women's boxing might take, the throne in terms of getting a mixed viewership of gender and age and excitement, and people will turn on the TV and will buy the pay-per-view for a female main event as much as they would see Serena or Venus Williams
Yeah.
in
And
Wimbledon
at
or
the end of
something.
the
So,
day, they don't have a helmet. They don't have a number on their jersey. Boxing,
mm-hmm,
that's why it's so special. It's the story behind. It's the
mm-hmm,
individual. If it's not like, let's say you take Lomachenko, like his abilities in the ring, phenomenal. You understand? Like,
mm-hmm,
or even you like, it's what sells the paper. In boxing, you're able to have that image. You're able to have that social media. You're able to tell your story. Whereas the other sports, you're just another number. Yeah, you might
mm-hmm,
score a lot of goals, but you don't get that same buzzing feeling, where you have it in the fight game, whether it's boxing or MMA. So, and even
mm-hmm.
tennis, that it's marketable. So I think it's an excellent point you bring up, and it's going well, and I hope it keeps going to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well
it's
deserved.
really going to be really interesting to see where that goes. Now, you've mentioned Lomachenko a couple of times. Is he your favorite boxer currently active right now?
Honestly, I don't have any favorite fighters. I get asked that question a
Okay.
lot. I don't. I mean, every fighter brings something spectacular. When I say Lomachenko or whether it's Mayweather or Canelo or Tyson, they're hard to repeat those kind of guys. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
repeat their techniques or what they're doing. It's just special. It's a combination of their experiences growing up and the way they learn boxing or whatever. But they do something that other fighters don't really do. And that's what makes them special. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's why I bring him up a lot. But yeah, very special talent, and it's very hard to do what he does. And it's
Yeah.
something to look up, but it's not something for everyone.
Well, and even with Tyson, there was something I remember. I can't remember if I was watching a doco or I was reading something about Tyson, but just even from a genetic, like biochemical level, the rate in which he could contract his obliques or something was just
Hmm.
beyond normal human potential. So to your point, something like that is like, yeah, can you try and teach that Mike Tyson peekaboo like inside? You can try to teach it, but will it ever be the same? Like, because again, there's a genetic component to that, and perhaps that's with Lomachenko as well. His ability to, recruit a mass amount of, fast twitch muscle fiber and be able to
Yeah,
move like he does, or his rate of vision, like to see things as quickly as he does. Can you ever replicate that? And it's really beautiful to see these people sprinkle out through boxing history
yeah.
and influence generations of boxers to come. And but
Just look at
yet,
yeah,
yet
Alberto
they'll
Duran.
never be replicated. To your point, it's very interesting.
So that's what makes them special.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your opinion on the Bival and Ramirez fight coming up? Just because he's been a hot topic on our podcast recently. How do you think that fight's going to go?
That's an exciting fight. That's a battle of styles. I mean,
Right?
Zurdo is like his volume is phenomenal. He's a lefty. He's tall. He's big. Uh, I don't know, man. It's a hard one to say who's gonna win. Bivol, I think, is very good at what he does and very
Mm-hmm.
conservative. So, like you just see it with Canelo. Canelo banks a lot on his power. He banks on wearing you down. He banks on,
Mm-hmm.
like giving you a bit of leeway and then taking it back like an experienced
Mm-hmm.
fighter would. But he didn't. There was no cracks in Bivol's game. So Bivol's
Mm-hmm.
style might be boring at times, the bouncy in and out, but he does it to a perfection. So I don't know how long he could do that with Zurdo, and we'll see. Like styles make fights, but
Yeah, it'll
it's
be
really a
interesting to
battle of
see.
styles. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's honestly just, if you're a boxing fan, it's just like it doesn't matter who wins. It's going to be a wicked fight. It'll be interesting to see if Zurdo can maintain his cool as well too. He can get a bit dog when he starts.
well, that's the thing too. So you have the lefty who's tall, who throws, but who stays there and engages and takes
Hmm.
bombs sometimes. He takes
Yeah.
punishment. Bivol won't do that.
No, and his
Bivol will
range
never.
management is so good.
Yeah, so it's definitely gonna be an interesting fight. But Zurdo is with Julian. Maybe they change something up. Maybe they switch something up. Maybe they
Yeah, well,
bring
that's
something
a
to the table. And Zurdo is a big guy. He's big for
yes.
175. You're not fighting a 5'7", 5'8" Canelo. I mean, so
Yeah, no, Zurdo's
you can't
he's
watch
a big
one
guy.
fight and be like, oh, he's gonna do this again. With no, it's completely different styles right there. So
Yeah. Well,
I don't
Julian was
trust it.
saying they're cooking up the best Zurdo yet, so I can't wait to see that.
I believe that.
And right, yeah, I mean you have to bring your A game to a fight like that. And I'm curious to kind of, I know we've got the Triple G Canelo third installment coming up. How are you feeling about that? You think is this just a cash grab at this point? Like, is this just, do we need to see this again? Is Triple
Yeah,
G too old? Like, what? How do you think?
I don't see Triple G hanging up in there. I mean, he still has that strength, but the age and it's just I don't see it. I don't see it being a good fight like the first one. The
Even
second
his,
fight, the second
yeah,
fight, Canelo really had the upper hand. But the
yeah.
thing is, like the cash grab, yeah, like maybe the boxing coaches will be like, why are we seeing this? But the casual fan of boxing loves loves that sound of Triple G versus Canelo. Like
Loves it.
people who won't turn in every weekend to watch the fights Friday, Saturday. Like they might watch 4 fights a year. They're gonna watch that fight, and that's why
Yeah.
we're seeing it. That's why we're seeing that fight again.
And Triple G, his last fight was against that Japanese fighter. What's his name?
Murata.
Murata, thank you. And he took a lot of punishment. That fight was not an easy fight for Triple G, and he's getting older. He took a lot more punishment than I'd seen him take. Murata brought a really good fight. Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting. All right, let's break it down a little bit. I'm curious to know a couple things just about you. This is a little bit lighter on the topic. What is your favorite all-time boxing movie?
My what? Sorry?
Favorite all-time boxing movie?
I think the Rockies for sure. I mean,
Rockies.
I was young. My dad would put that every weekend, and it's just like that. The Rocky movies are they represent like the boxing of it. Forget it, but just the story again. I'm going back to seeing how someone starts up, and then they do these club fights, and they're that's what sells. That's what people like. So for sure, that one and the Cinderella Man, that was a good story too. There. Yeah, nice. I have a soft heart for those stories, but definitely my favorite boxing movies.
Tugs on the old heartstrings of Coach Thompson. Okay, cool. And then what's on your boxing playlist in the gym? Like when you're in there, you're doing your thing, you're grinding with your athletes. What do you got on the repeats?
When I'm with the athletes, like the pro fighters, maybe something in the background, but we're talking, we're communicating, we're talking boxing. And there could be a fire in the corner of the gym. Like we're so into it, we get in the groove of stuff, and there's a lot of communication. So music's not really a thing for when we're doing, whether it's sparring, whether it's bag work, pad work. It might be playing in the background, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting for a lot of people that haven't been in a competitive setting in boxing because fitness boxing presents the element of music being so closely intertwined with the experience, and then when you go into a competitive atmosphere, it's like dead silence in the gym or whatever. Like even the boxing club that I was most recently fighting on their team, it was just like we trained in silence. And I remember a friend coming to watch and just being like, "This is something." Like it was just such a right. But you don't even think about it. You're not thinking like, "Oh man, like I really wish I could hear my Caribbean Bottega beats or something right now." But it's just kind of funny. And then for your how many would you say fitness boxing clients do you have comparatively to your pros or your amateurs? Or do you do any of that at all?
Yeah, I have clients. I have maybe over 25, 30 clients. And I have 2 pros in camp right now. Ryan's coming in tomorrow. I'm working with other pros, but definitely right now I'm still doing a lot of privates, more than I wish I had to, but eventually the pro game is going to be so good that maybe I'll keep 2-3 clients. But
awesome.
If I was working construction to help me do the pros, it wouldn't be the same. So I'm always in the gym. I play with my schedule. I could leave camp for like a few weeks if I have to. But I have a lot of clients, and most of them are my friends now, so it just makes my job a lot easier.
Awesome. Now, I believe you recently opened your own gym?
Yeah, well, I'm partnered up with someone.
Partnered up. Awesome.
Yeah.
And how was that experience? And I think you mentioned you did it during COVID. You started doing your own thing, or did the gym evolve after that?
A bit in the middle of that, but having your own gym, it's fun. It's amazing. I mean, you do what you want, how you clean it, how you want it. There's no one stepping over your toes. And like I said before, like when I train my pros, I really like that. I like the mix of it. Sometimes I'll bring my pros to train elsewhere, or usually I'll bring them to Mark Ramsey's gym where there's a lot of great fighters that train there. But I like the privacy. I like the one-on-ones. The quietness and the focus, the personal energy, one-on-one, or even if it's 2 fighters, the focus, being able to concentrate and really go deep into the understandings of boxing. So it's been great. My gym, it's a beautiful spot, and it's brought a lot to me so far, and yeah, I love it.
And was it challenging kind of having that smack dab in the middle of sort of the COVID evolution? Did you have any hard days where you were like, I don't know if we're going to do this?
Yeah, I mean, listen, COVID really I was trying to, I was talking to one of my buddies, and it seems like this last year or so, I definitely stepped up my game as a coach and putting more hours, more energy, motivation. And I was wondering, like, what happened? Like, why am I such on another level and the grind is so hard, like the motivation of things, And he told me, he said, you were locked up in your house and you had nothing to do but talk to yourself. And during COVID, I was like, I forgot everything I know about coaching. I didn't, but you're there, you're asking yourself, am I ever going to coach again? What's going on? I can't do what I love. I can't train my boys and get them ready for a fight. So you start losing those. But at the same time, it's really like, okay, is this really what you want to do? Do you want to keep pushing in this sport? So COVID really for some people I know it was devastating, but for me, it's just like reminded me of what I really want to do, and just look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. Let's go. So hard days for sure. There's hard days all the time, but you keep pushing, you keep grinding, you keep trying to get better, and you embrace these hard days because they just help you to build up stronger, So like before when I said, some experiences were bad experiences in boxing, bad fights, but you learn so much from them, and it's cliche, the Rocky or whatever, but what matters is how you're going to go from there, right?
Yeah.
So the COVID business of all of it, it was rough at times, but it definitely even for fighters, I've seen fighters just be like, okay, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But other fighters, it really be like, okay, well, I got to train even though I don't have a fight. Well, that's how hungry I am, so.
I think for people that have jumped so deep into, like not just this industry, let's say any industry, and to the point where they identify themselves based on what they do. Like, I am a fighter or I am a coach. And then having that identity crisis of like, man, like there's no fights to fight. There's no fighters to coach. There's, and then to be able to come through that and have that solidify who you are, and to make a decision regardless of the hurdles to go forward. And then hard days feel so much better when you're doing what you love to do, what you were meant to do, and you're doing it for yourself, right? And I think we can relate to that so much when in our challenges through COVID as promoters, and even regardless of COVID, like just doing anything and trying to do anything new and anything different,
adapting
is
new,
really hard.
Right?
Yeah, it's
but
hard, You have to.
Absolutely have to.
And on that, bringing back the idea of Black Buffalo as well, we wanted to check in and see how he was doing. I know there was a complication that kept him off of our card last April, and how's he doing?
He's very healthy. He's doing well.
Great.
I feel like it's the first time in his career that, things are starting to move. And again, we learn from previous experiences, but, he's almost there. He's almost there where he's going to be on TV and fighting in big fights. Not saying that he's going to be the A side or anything, but we're ready. We're just maybe a camp or two away from being on another level and being ready to fight on that big stage. So I'm very excited. It's been he's been boxing for 9 years now, so to see him keep fighting, get better, have that hunger, it's amazing. It's a beautiful story, and we can't wait to share it, so he's doing good. Awesome. And I'm really excited for what's next for him. It's been a long time coming, and a lot of sacrifices on his part, and it's going to be good. I just know it. I just see it. I just know it's going to be good. You just got to keep working hard and keep pushing,
And what is the next, let's say, what does the next level for you look like? What is the next 10 years of your coaching? Where is that going to bring you? Where will you be living? Who will you be working with? What does that look like for you?
The image in my head is just take it up another level. I mean, like I just mentioned before, COVID really puts a reality. It really put a reality check, So since that moment, I'm just trying to find new ways to push myself, not necessarily to be motivated, but just find new ways of getting my name more out there. Whether it's going down to Florida for 5 weeks, whether it's I'm starting to put on a team of managers and people financially backing me, where I can go ahead and sign fighters and build them up, So all these things that are essentially going to bring me to being one of the best coaches in the world. That's where I see myself. There's no doubt. It's just a matter of time, Younger, I was impatient. Now I'm just leaving it, just concentrating on what I can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Russ Amber was one of the ones who always told me, he's like, you don't want to be asking for opportunities. You want the opportunities to come, and when they come, you better be ready. So I'm a strong believer that there's going to be opportunities that fall on my lap, and I'm going to take full advantage of them, and just keep working with the different people in the boxing game, whether it's promoters, managers, other coaches, keep getting my name out there, and eventually be a top coach and have guys fight on the big stages. That's really where I see myself, and that's why I'm still in this game, because I know I have what it takes to get there. It's just a matter of time, and keep pushing, and making sacrifices and balancing the family life too, and it'll be there. And I like Montreal, but I'm also open to maybe partially living in the U.S. or full-time living in the U.S., because nothing to take away from this place here. I mean, it's been great for me. Look where it's brought me, but the big time fighters are in the U.S. Whether it's entertainment and boxing, whether it's entertainment and movies or singing and stuff. The big money, the big people are all in the U.S. So
yeah, absolutely. It's the next step for sure. I love that quote. I want to take a second and just kind of reflect on that. I want to be able to make sure we bring that out for the highlight reels of the podcast with you. Is don't ask for opportunities. The opportunities should come to you, and you better be ready when they come. I think that's brilliant, and I really see that in your character and your work ethic. And, Dan spoke so highly of you, and I know a lot of coaches here, have a lot of respect for what you're doing. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast and be able to chat with you and meet you. And really excited about, what you bring to boxing. And we can't wait to, have your career grow and flourish right in front of us, and see where you go, what next level looks like for you.
Thank you very much. Those are very kind words of you, and I hope I'll be back on this podcast to talk some more boxing and views.
Well, you know what I was
sport.
thinking? I would love to have you and Julian Tua back on the podcast together and have you guys riff a little bit. Yeah.
You look at this podcast over here, it says 1 hour and 4 minutes. I just get this feel. I never spoke to him or anything, but one of my close associates, Ryan Scalia, knows him. He's been in his gym. He talks to him. He has some fighters with him. And just the way Ryan would describe Julian, I think that number is going to be like 4 hours up there. We're just going to be like talking boxing in our world.
Right.
But
I'll end up just
that to
going
me would be an honor.
Off.
Like he's definitely one of the top coaches in the U.S. and he's young too. So to me, I would love to have an opportunity just to talk boxing and strategy and see how he thinks and sees, different
the coolest
elements
part
of
about this
game.
is you and Julian actually are so similar in the way you approach your coaching. And I want to say this with reverence, is the obsession, and like the learning how to teach and adapting and bringing in information. And he spoke very similar about his idea of, bringing in different information to adapt to specific people at specific moments. It was just all about the evolution of his coaching game, athlete by athlete, and hearing so many similarities between you talk about your coaching and how he talks about his. Yeah, I think that would be an episode that would just blow people's minds right out of the water, especially all the boxing nerds to be watching our podcast for sure. So we'll have to make that happen.
Try to get that.
Yeah, okay. That's my promise to you, Jessy. I will make that happen for sure.
Okay, I'm going to remember.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming on to the Empire Boxing Podcast, and we will definitely see you again.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
All right, Jessy, take care.
Make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe to Empire Boxing on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.